Hello, it's Lord Slar here, and welcome back to Reappraisal, where I take a look at the top 10 worst Doctor Who stories according to a Doctor Who magazine poll from 2014 to see if they deserve their reputation as the show's very worst. Today we have come on to one of the least talked about Doctor Who episodes, Underworld. It's certainly not an episode that leaps to mind when you think of the worst Doctor Who episodes, despite ranking so low. After all, there's just not really much to say about it. This will probably be a short video, as this story is simply exhausting to get through despite only being 4 parts, and honestly, it's even more exhausting to talk about. Let's start with the positives though. Episode 1, while not being mind-blowing, is a decent episode of Doctor Who. It captures the feeling of being lost in deep space well, a trope I wish they'd use more in Doctor Who. I like the mood of purgatory on the ship, where they're locked in this endless quest for the colony ship they're looking for, the last hope for their people, and being unable to die until they completed their mission, feeling very unenthusiastic about life. I also really enjoyed a bit of insight in Time Lord history, where the reason for their isolationism is revealed, and it's because of their intervention in the planet where the people of the ship came from, as they all ended up killing each other in a giant war because of the technology the Time Lords gave them. Although, thinking about it, why didn't they just make a story about that, as it sounds far more interesting? Despite having some really dodgy science, I did enjoy the bit with the nebula. There's always something fun when Doctor Who does deep space with the strange realities of barely known space material. Overall, it was a strong start, with some good world building for the dead society of the Minnows. It all goes downhill from here though. Parts 2, 3 and 4, in a word, are painfully dull. It just feels like really uninspired and lazy Doctor Who. Repressed slave society, guards, endless running down corridors, sacrifices, and a reliance on Greek mythology to try in vain to inject something interesting into the story. It just feels like same old, a show which has run out of ideas. Of course, this was far from true, as season 16 showed us, but perhaps it was this way for Bob Baker and Dave Martin, as this episode and the next one, The Armageddon Factor, all seem devoid of much interesting or new, often feeling like they're retreading similar territory to previous stories, including their own. A dead planet and a race bank type situation was done well enough in The Hand of Fear. We didn't need to do it again in a slightly different way. Of course, we can't talk about Underworld without talking about the sets, or lack thereof. Doctor Who had some serious budgeting issues at the time due to inflation, which led the decision to film much of the story on a primitive green screen effect. Of course, Classic Who has had plenty of poor effects in the past, but when it's a ship practical effect with a real set, the actors still have something to work with. Without even that, and just a green screen, especially for actors who hadn't came across such a thing before, especially used to such an extent, they really struggle, and so does the cameraman. Every shot feels incredibly flat. The actors struggle to inject any kind of tension into these scenes at all, and it just doesn't work. So bloody much of it is spent running up and down green screen corridors. It's just not fun at all to watch. I think it has to be said that Underworld has one of the worst productions of any Doctor Who episode, as it just doesn't work, and this is a massive detriment to the story. To conclude, Underworld does not get the reappraisal. Yes, episode 1 is quite good, but that isn't enough to stop it from being a terrible story. Lazy and interesting writing combined with an appalling cash-strapped production leads to one of the most unwatchable Doctor Who stories. Yes, it may not have the worst or most offensive script in the world, but when TV is created which is so thoroughly unentertaining, I don't think it's unfair at all to consider it one of the worst of the series that it came from. Do yourself a favour and don't watch Underworld. The quest is the bloody quest indeed.